Hi, I'm Elizabeth Van Ostren, an associate professor in the College of Public Health at Temple University. I'm also the creator of ELI, the Emergency Law Inventory, which is a compendium of over 1,800 statutes and regulations that pertain to disaster responders in all 50 US states, the District of Columbia, federal law, and laws in 8 freely associated states and territories. I'd like to introduce you to Scott Burris. Scott is the director of the Center for Public Health Law Research at the James E. Beasley School of Law here at Temple University. He oversaw the development of Law Atlas and PDAPS, two leading sources of interactive open source data on laws of public health importance. He also oversaw the development of Monocle, which is the legal coding software that we used in the new version of ELI. Scott has been a public health lawyer since 1987. He's going to tell you a little bit about how researchers use ELI to help them in their fields. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm delighted to be here.
So, could you describe generally how people conduct legal research?
With difficulty, it requires both time and expertise, and then it requires access to some kind of source of law that's convenient to search.
So, how can ELI help?
Since ELI is a curated resource, it's already focused on the topics that people want to know. It already has the exact law they're looking for. And using the ELI website, you can search through jurisdictions and keywords and topics to find exactly the information you need pretty quickly.
So, there are 5 legal topics in ELI, and I'm going to go through each one and ask you just to give a brief summary of what that topic pertains to. So, what is meant by liability?
Well, liability is financial responsibility for some outcome based on one's behavior. So, um, people who are actively out there responding to emergencies need to know what the legal risks are and how to minimize or avoid them.
Why is licensure important to disaster responders?
Licensure is really crucial. We depend upon professionals coming from outside jurisdictions to pitch in during an emergency or disaster and to practice their profession, to be doctors or nurses. They need to have a license that's valid in the state.
So, one of the topics that is new to ELI in the updated version is protection from threats. And this became an important topic, particularly during COVID. So, what is meant by protection from threats with respect to the laws in ELI?
Since COVID, we've started to have laws that clearly protect responders and health officials and others who are trying to deal with an emergency from threats and harassment. So this resource helps us know where that kind of behavior is a crime.
You touched on this before, and this is kind of related to licensure. What is meant by the legal term scope of practice?
All professionals have a defined set of things that they're allowed to do. That's their scope of practice. But those scopes of practice are based on normal situations. Sometimes during an emergency, there are exceptions or broader authority given to various kinds of providers so that they can respond appropriately. And of course, people need to know that when they go to respond so that they're staying within the bounds, but also taking advantage of the greater flexibilities that are allowed during an emergency.
And so the fifth legal topic is workers' benefits. So that includes things like workers' comp. So if you're injured when you're deployed, who will pay for your hospitalization? What other topics are included within the broad umbrella topic of workers' benefits?
Oftentimes, emergency responders are volunteers, not employees. So we need to know whether they're covered by workers' compensation under the emergency or there's some other provision for them should they be harmed.
Okay, so let's switch gears just a little bit. And we know from chatting with folks across the country about ELI that not only lawyers, in fact, many people who aren't lawyers use this tool. So something that is confusing to them is what happens if There's a federal law, which is contained in ELI, and a state law that's also contained in ELI, and they're in conflict.
Higher law in America trumps lower law. Federal law generally trumps state law. State law generally trumps local law.
I know that a lot of your work has to do with policy surveillance and legal surveillance. So, how can ELI help with doing such work?
The emergency law inventory is an example of what we call policy surveillance, the systematic scientific tracking of laws of public health importance. Because law matters to health, because, for example, emergency law defines the way that people can and will respond in an emergency and what governments can do about them, it's important to know what that law is, to track it across the 50 states, and to keep track of it over time so that people have immediate access to it when they need it. A scientific collection process such has been used for the emergency law inventory is also useful because it creates data that researchers can use to evaluate the implementation and effects of the law. So it's doing double duty.
My final question is this. We are really a nation of 51 different areas when it comes to public health law. So, how can ELI be used by decision makers to make better decisions?
When there's not an emergency, it's possible to compare laws across jurisdictions and therefore to look for gaps and look for good models that jurisdictions can adopt as part of their preparedness. In an emergency, the inventory is a vital tool because it allows people who are under stress and under pressure of time to quickly find the rules they need to find to figure out how they can do what they need to do.